Hey there, fellow philosopher. Ready to dive deep into 17th century England with me today?
Yeah.
It was a pretty wild time intellectually, and we're going to explore a group of thinkers you might not expect, the Cambridge Platonists.
Yeah, the Cambridge Platonists are fascinating. They popped up during a time of huge upheaval. Like, just picture England in the 1600s, civil war, religious and political turmoil.
Yeah, not exactly the peaceful setting you usually think of when you think of philosophy.
Right. It makes you wonder how all that chaos influenced their ideas.
It really does.
Yeah.
So how did all this turmoil shape their thinking?
Well, to get that, you got to understand the main intellectual force at Cambridge University back then. It was this super strict form of Calvinistic scholasticism.
Yeah, that system.
Yeah.
I'm guessing our philosopher listener is familiar, but for those who aren't,
Yeah.
it basically stresses God's total control, predestination, and a really structured, logical approach to theology.
Exactly. And as a philosopher, you've probably seen how those ideas still pop up in debates about free will determinism, the nature of knowledge.
For sure. And it's in this setting, in this intellectual climate, that the Cambridge Platonists appear offering a totally different perspective.
Yeah, they really did shake things up.
Totally. So who are the key players we should know about?
The big names are Benjamin Whichcote, Nathaniel Culverwell, Henry Moore, and Ralph Cudworth. These guys challenge the whole academic scene with a philosophy rooted in reason tolerance and a really optimistic view of human potential.
That's so interesting. They were like swimming upstream, weren't they?
Yeah.
What were some of their core beliefs that made them stand out from that dominant Calvinism?
Well, one of their most interesting ideas was this concept called the perennial philosophy. They called it the Philosophia Perennis.
Okay, perennial philosophy. I like it. It sounds deep. What's
Yeah.
that all about?
Basically, it's this idea that there's one true wisdom that flows through all time periods and all cultures. This universal truth goes beyond the limits of any specific time or place.
Whoa, that's a big claim.
Yeah.
How do they square that idea with all the different philosophies and religions out there throughout history? It seems kind of naive to think everyone agrees on one universal truth, right?
Right, that's a great question. They didn't necessarily think every culture had it perfectly figured out, but they believed there were hints of it, sparks of wisdom you could find across different traditions.
Okay, so more like glimmers of this truth scattered around.
Yeah, exactly. And they saw their own work as bringing together the best insights from Plato, Plotinus, Aristotle, Stoicism, even newer figures like Descartes, who was really shaking things up with his ideas about mind and matter.
So it wasn't about finding one dogma everyone agreed on, but recognizing a potential for shared wisdom even in seemingly different viewpoints. That makes a lot more sense.
Exactly. And, their interest in Descartes highlights something else key about their thinking, that they really believed reason and faith could get along.
Really? So they didn't see those two as enemies like some people do?
Not at all. They argued that reason was a gift from God, a tool we were given to understand both the world and the divine.
That's so different from the classic faith versus reason battle we still see today.
Yeah.
Could you unpack that a bit more? How did they see that relationship playing out in their philosophy?
Sure. They believed God is knowable, meaning the human mind, with reason as its guide, could grasp truths about life and morality. For them, reason wasn't just about logic and deduction. It was about a kind of spiritual insight, an intuition of the divine order in everything.
So reason wasn't cold and calculating, but something that could illuminate the deepest truths about us and the universe. I could see how that would challenge the rigidness of Calvinism.
Exactly. It offered a different way of looking at things. Now let's talk about some specific thinkers, starting with Benjamin Whichcote. He's often considered the father of the Cambridge Platonists.
Whichcote, the founding father, what made him so influential in this group?
Well, he was known for his amazing sermons and these short, sharp sayings that really promoted reason and tolerance.
Like memorable quotes.
Yeah, exactly. And, his own experience in the chaos of the Civil War probably shaped his strong rejection of those harsh predestination ideas in Calvinism. Instead, he focused on God's goodness and love and argued that humans have free will and can become better morally.
So his philosophy had this really ethical and human focus. It wasn't just theoretical debates, but about how we actually live and treat each other. His rejection of predestination, that's pretty radical for the time, isn't it? What were his arguments against it?
He believed God's love applied to everyone and that divine justice wasn't about random punishment. It was about helping people grow morally.
That's interesting. So a more nurturing view of God.
Yes, and he saw reason as the key to unlocking our natural understanding of right and wrong, this moral compass we get from God. This fits with their whole belief in human potential, something they felt Calvinism had missed.
Sounds like Whichcote was setting the stage for a much more hopeful and humane approach to philosophy and religion. one focused on our power to choose and our ability to reason morally.
Exactly. And this focus on human reason and innate knowledge gets developed further by Nathaniel Culverwell. He wrote the first published work by a Cambridge Platonist. It's called An Elegant and Learned Discourse of the Light of Nature.
Love the title. The light of nature. It really captures that idea of reason as a source of illumination, a guide to knowledge and moral action. What were some of Culverwell's big ideas? What made him stand out?
Culverwell was super interested in the idea of innate knowledge. He argued that we're not born as blank slates. Our minds actually come with certain fundamental truths already in them put there by God. He called reason this intellectual lamp.
Intellectual lamp. I like that.
Right, and he said this lamp lets us access those truths that are already within us. It illuminates our understanding of ourselves and the world.
That completely flips the blank slate idea on its head, doesn't it? It suggests we have this built-in ability to understand truth and morality, which fits perfectly with Winnicott's emphasis on human potential.
Exactly. And Culverwell's ideas about innate knowledge connect to debates that are still going on today, like the nature versus nurture debate, the role of experience versus inborn abilities in shaping how we understand things.
Wow, so he was wrestling with questions that are still alive in philosophy of mind and epistemology today. That's incredible. It's amazing to think that these 17th century thinkers were dealing with issues we're still trying to figure out.
It is. And speaking of grappling with big ideas, let's move on to Henry Moore. He was probably the most prolific writer of the group, a philosopher, a poet, even delved into the Kabbalah.
Wow, that's quite a range. He sounds like someone who loved exploring different intellectual traditions.
Right.
What did he bring to the Cambridge Platonist table? What were his unique contributions?
Moore was a fascinating guy. He developed some really unique and even kind of eccentric philosophical views. One of his most striking ideas was that both matter and spirit take up space.
Wait, so both matter and spirit have a physical presence.
That's what he thought. This challenged the Cartesian dualism that was getting popular back then, which said mind and matter were totally separate things.
So he was questioning even Descartes' influential ideas. Interesting. What led him to that view of spirit and matter?
He believed there's a fundamental connection between the physical and spiritual realms. They're not two separate substances, but different expressions of one reality. He also came up with this concept of an active spirit of nature that runs the world.
Spirit of nature, so like a force connecting God and the physical universe.
Yeah, kind of like a divine go-between.
I'm sensing a pattern here. A deep belief in the interconnectedness of everything the divine woven into reality itself.
You're right. And this is central to their rejection of a purely mechanistic view of the universe, which was becoming popular with the scientific revolution.
It's like they were trying to find a way to make those new scientific discoveries fit with a more spiritual view of the world.
That's a great way to put it. And this leads us to our last key figure, Ralph Cudworth. He's known for his huge and ambitious book, The True Intellectual System of the Universe.
That sounds like a serious philosophy book. What was Cudworth getting at in that work? What were his main concerns?
Cudworth was really worried about defending the existence of God and the reality of spiritual forces.
Why was that?
Well, atheism and materialism were on the rise, and he saw them as threats to both morality and human well-being.
So he felt like those ideas could lead to a less moral, less fulfilling life.
Yeah, basically. And in The True Intellectual System of the Universe, he systematically argues against those views. He uses both ancient philosophy and the newest scientific findings of his time.
A true polymath, weaving together all those different threads of knowledge to build his argument.
Absolutely. One of his most interesting ideas is this concept of plastic nature.
Plastic nature. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
Cudworth's plastic nature was like a divine middleman, an active force that shapes and orders the physical world, guiding its development based on God's plan. For him, it wasn't just a random mechanical process.
So there's purpose and intelligence behind it all.
Exactly. He wasn't saying the universe is just a giant clockwork machine. There was meaning woven into the fabric of nature itself.
So he was trying to bridge the gap between that old idea that everything has a purpose and the new idea that the universe just runs on impersonal laws.
Exactly. He was trying to reconcile those two seemingly opposite views.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how engaged the Cambridge Platonists were with the cutting-edge science of their day, while still holding on to a deeply spiritual understanding of reality.
It truly is. And this willingness to engage with both faith and reason, ancient wisdom, A&D, modern science, is one of the things that makes them so relevant to us as philosophers today. It's interesting, as we dig into their ideas, we start to see that the Cambridge Platonists weren't just focused on abstract debates.
Yeah, their focus on reason, virtue, human potential, makes you think they weren't content to just sit around and theorize. They wanted to know how to actually live better, more meaningful lives.
Right. And that's a big reason why they still matter to us today. We're in a world wrestling with all these tough ethical problems: climate change, AI, social inequality, political divisions. The Cambridge Platonists and their insights into how reason, ethics, and spirituality connect, they give us a helpful perspective on navigating all that.
As a philosopher, I bet you've thought a lot about these very issues. Do you see any specific links between what they were worried about and the challenges we face now?
Oh, definitely. Take their defense of reason, for example. They lived at a time when new scientific discoveries and philosophical ideas were challenging traditional beliefs. Does that sound familiar?
It does. We're flooded with information all the time, a lot of it conflicting. It's hard to figure out what's true and what's not. It feels like we're living in this age of skepticism and relativism where everyone has their own reality.
Exactly. And the Cambridge Platonists, they knew the dangers of both being too dogmatic and being too skeptical. They believed that reason used the right way could be a powerful tool for navigating this kind of complexity, for separating real knowledge from just opinion.
So they weren't saying just blindly trust reason, but use it critically and thoughtfully.
Right. But they also understood that reason itself could be twisted, used to justify all sorts of harmful ideas. That's why they emphasized ethics and virtue so much, developing a well-ordered soul that could tell the difference between truth and lies, right and wrong.
That's a really important point. It's not enough to just be smart or know a lot of stuff. We need to develop our moral compass, our ability to feel empathy and compassion. It sounds like they were arguing for a kind of education that developed the whole person, the mind and the heart.
Totally agree. They didn't see philosophy as some stuffy academic thing. It was a way of life, a path to becoming better human beings. They believed that real knowledge should lead to right action, to a commitment to justice, kindness, and the common good.
Their focus on moral development and responsibility for society that feels so relevant today, doesn't it? In a world that often puts individual gain over the well-being of everyone, their ideas offer a powerful alternative to that me-first attitude.
Absolutely. And their thoughts on the relationship between science and religion, that's got some valuable lessons for us too. Remember, they were living through the scientific revolution when the old way of understanding the universe was being completely overturned by new discoveries.
Oh yeah, that must have been a mind-blowing time to be alive, seeing the foundations of knowledge shifting right under their feet.
Yeah.
Did they see that as a threat to their faith?
It's so interesting because while they were obviously fascinated by these new scientific advances, they didn't see them as contradicting their religious beliefs. They were convinced that true science and true religion couldn't actually be in conflict because they both came from the same divine source.
So instead of putting science and religion in separate boxes, they were trying to find a way to integrate them into a more complete understanding of reality.
Exactly. Remember, they saw reason as a gift from God, a tool for understanding the amazing creation. They believed that by studying the natural world, we could gain insights into God's mind, and that faith could inspire scientific inquiry.
That's powerful. It challenges that polarized view we often see today where science and religion are like two forces battling it out.
You got it. It reminds us that there are many ways of knowing, many paths to the truth. The Cambridge Platonists weren't afraid of complexity. They were happy to draw from all sorts of sources in their search for understanding. They were true polymaths, blending insights from ancient philosophy, religious traditions, and the new science of their time.
It sounds like they were pushing for a much more nuanced and integrated approach to knowledge than we often see in our intellectual world today. Their willingness to embrace multiple perspectives is really refreshing.
It is. And their example reminds us that seeking truth doesn't have to be a fight between competing ideologies. It can be a journey we take together, a shared exploration of the universe's mysteries and our place in it.
So knowing all this about the Cambridge Platonists, their unique take on philosophy, their embrace of reason and faith, their concern for ethics and virtue, what lessons can we as philosophers take from their example?
That's a good question to think about. They give us a model for how to engage with complex ideas, how to connect seemingly separate areas of knowledge, and how to ground our intellectual pursuits in a commitment to living meaningful, ethical lives.
Their legacy shows us that philosophy isn't just about abstract theories. It's about how we live, how we treat each other, and how we make sense of our place in the big picture. It's really inspiring to see how they dealt with a world that was changing so much. Holding on to their faith, while being open to new discoveries. That's a balance a lot of people struggle with even today.
You're right. Their approach shows us that being open to complexity doesn't mean throwing away our values or beliefs. It's about finding ways to fit new knowledge into what we already believe, expanding our understanding without losing sight of what really matters.
And that emphasis on ethics, on developing virtue, it feels like such an important contrast to the super rational or utilitarian approaches we often see in ethics today.
I agree. The Cambridge Platonists remind us that ethics isn't just about weighing outcomes or following rules. It's about growing as a person, nurturing those abilities for empathy, compassion, and doing what's right. It's about becoming the best versions of ourselves intellectually and morally.
It's a beautiful idea, one that really speaks to me as a philosopher. It seems like they're saying true knowledge isn't just about gathering facts or winning arguments. It's about transforming ourselves, becoming wiser, more compassionate people.
You put it perfectly. They saw philosophy as a way of life, a path to self-improvement and moral growth. And this vision, I think, has a lot to say about how we approach philosophy today.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. How do you think their ideas can shape our philosophical work in the 21st century?
Well, for one thing, they challenge us to look beyond those narrow categories of specialized fields. Cambridge Platonists were real polymaths. They took insights from all kinds of sources: ancient philosophy, religious traditions, scientific discoveries. They wove it all together into this rich tapestry of knowledge.
It's a good reminder that the big questions facing humanity, they don't usually fit neatly into one academic box.
Yeah.
We need to be willing to think across different fields, to bring together different ways of knowing, to be okay with complexity if we really want to understand the challenges of our time.
Exactly. And their emphasis on how everything's connected, that divine spark within reality. It offers a powerful counter to the feeling of being fragmented and isolated that's so common in modern life.
It's almost like they're inviting us to find that sense of wonder and enchantment in the world again. To see the universe not as this cold, uncaring machine, but as a living, breathing thing full of meaning and purpose.
I love that. And that sense of wonder, that awareness of how everything's connected, it naturally leads to a deeper sense of responsibility. When we see ourselves as part of this web of life, we become more sensitive to the needs of others, more mindful of the impact of our actions.
So for them, ethics wasn't just about following rules in the abstract. It was about developing a real understanding of our interconnectedness, recognizing that what we do has ripple effects that touch not only us, but the whole web of life.
That's it. And this ethical perspective, grounded in that deep sense of connection and respect for all life. It feels incredibly relevant as we face global issues like climate change, inequality, the rise of AI.
It's clear that the Cambridge Platonists, even though they were back in the 17th century, have a lot to teach us about living wisely and ethically in the 21st century. They give us a model for how to think deeply, how to live with compassion, and how to approach the mysteries of the universe with wonder and humility.
I couldn't agree more. As we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought from Whichcote that sums up their vision. He said, "Heaven is first a temper and then a place."
What a beautiful thought. It suggests that creating a more just and compassionate world starts within each of us, with cultivating our own character, our ability to love and understand.
Exactly. The Cambridge Platonists remind us that seeking truth, goodness, and beauty isn't just an intellectual thing. It's a journey that lasts a lifetime. It involves our whole being, our minds, our hearts, our actions.
Well said. And with that, we leave you, our fellow philosopher, to continue this journey of exploration and discovery. May the legacy of the Cambridge Platonists inspire you to think deeply, to live ethically, and to approach the world with wonder and compassion. Until next time, keep diving deep.